culpability and more panicky preemptive attacks from Republicans. Nick Ackerman is a former Watergate special prosecutor, and Yamiche Alcindor and Ken Vogel are both reporters for the New York Times, all of them joining us now. Great to have you with us. Nick, let me begin with you. The president claiming, as we saw there, he has the absolute right to do what he wants with the DOJ, then singling out now private citizens, Huma Abedin, former FBI Director James Comey. What kind of message does that send, you think?
Sending a message that his whole mentality is pre-1776, when we had a king that ruled the 13 colonies. We made a decision back then. It was a pretty radical decision.
You don't think he got the memo?
I don't think he got the memo. I don't think he read the memo. We made a decision to be governed by a constitution, to be governed by laws. We got rid of the king. We put in a president who has checks and balances, that is not above the law, that is subject to the law just like every other citizen in this country. And the problem with what he is doing directly undermines what has been over 250 years of American history, which he doesn't understand.
And I'm sure you've seen the counter-argument, though, made by folks like Alan Dershowitz and others, that the president has the legal authority as the top law enforcement official in the country, that he can do that with the Department of Justice. He can direct the investigation or order an investigation. Is that not correct, legally speaking?
Legally speaking, he could set a priority for the Department of Justice. But when he is directly a subject of the investigation, when he is one of the people that is being investigated, and his campaign is being investigated, for him to be putting his 2 cents into this whole thing. I mean, he didn't have the right to tell Jim Comey to stop the investigation into Mike Flynn. That is an obstruction of justice. He cannot obstruct justice and be above the law. That's what it means to not have a king and instead a president of the United States.
Ken, we were talking there about Senator Blumenthal talking about possible indictments in 2018. Do you think we're going to see more indictments or guilty pleas throughout this investigation in the year ahead?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible, and I do think that the president's lawyers are bracing him for that potential, and that may be what's behind his preemptive attacks. And I do agree that they are preemptive attacks against the Justice Department as an effort, part of an effort, really multi-pronged effort, frankly, to undermine the Justice Department and particularly the special counsel's investigation. We see it not just in the calls for investigations of Comey and claims that he's being treated unfairly because Hillary Clinton wasn't prosecuted, but also in this focus on the dossier and suggestions that the dossier was a Democratic piece of opposition research that somehow shaped or colored the investigation of him. We see it in his going after these individual members of Mueller's team, and we see it in these claims that there is a deep state that is somehow working to undermine him.
But Ken,
and Republicans are picking up that line of attack in a way that is pretty concerted, and it is effective. If you look at polls, Republican voters say that they distrust the way that Bob Mueller is handling this investigation.
But Ken, to the president's statements that he gave to your publication, New York Times, he said that he thinks Mueller will be fair to him. Do you think, or have you seen from that reporting, your reporting, that perhaps he's doing that as a front while his surrogates are striking that more aggressive tone about Mueller and their credibility and the investigators? Or does he genuinely believe that?
You know, it's tough to tell. He's vacillated. He's gone back and forth and said things that that suggest that he doesn't believe that he's being treated fairly. I mean, the whole idea that this is a witch hunt and a hoax, for one. But then he did say, most recently to us and our reporter Michael Schmidt down at Mar-a-Lago, that he thought that Mueller would treat him fairly. You have to think that some of this is being shaped by what his lawyers are telling him is going on in the investigation on any given day as to whether he's going to lash out or sit back, as they are advising him to do, and sort of let the investigation run its course.
Yamiche, I know that the former acting Attorney General Sally Yates, who Trump also fired, wrote today on Twitter that Trump slanders career DOJ professionals as deep state, calls for a political opponent, and tries to seek DOJ on a potential witness against him beyond abnormal, dangerous. Walk us through what might be dangerous here.
what might be dangerous is that this is the same Department of Justice and the same criminal agencies that essentially keep Americans safe. So if you have people that are working for these agencies who now feel as though the person that they're serving, either one, does not believe in their work, or two, actually gets people to leave those jobs and then leaves America open to whatever could be going on in the world, there's this idea that if we don't have a Department of Justice, if we don't have these agencies and FBI that feels as though the president actually believes in their work, that hurts morale. And I think that's not like a regular agency or a regular job where people's morale doesn't affect the actual security of the United States. The Department of Justice actually needs to go out there and keep Americans safe. You think about their work in police departments. You think about their work in other areas. So we depend on these people to make the rules in America actually stick. The other thing I think is really important here is that we see President Trump essentially doubling down on who he's always been, which is someone who really does deeply believe in conspiracy theories. And when you have this idea, you have someone from the podium of the United States saying that the president doesn't think that all the DOJ is part of the deep state, but that obviously means that some people might be part of that deep state. That's a pretty remarkable statement coming from Sarah Sanders.
Nick, let me ask you about Congressman Jim Himes, who serves on the House Intel Committee, because he told the Washington Post, we have this, the Democrats are seriously exploring the possibility of issuing a minority report that details the degree to which Republicans tried to impede a full investigation. Should that end up happening, what impact do you think something like that could have?
Well, look, it's going to counteract whatever the Republicans say. For them, at this point in time, to issue a report giving a clean bill of health to anybody in this thing is absolutely crazy. They don't have access to Mike Flynn. They don't have access to Papadopoulos. They don't have access to all of the evidence that the Mueller group has. So, I mean, in a way, this is sort of a bit player, and it's a bit of nothingness, really, because you don't have a real investigation here. It wasn't like the Watergate Senate Select Committee, where the Democrats were in control. You had a real investigation. Right. They really dug in and tried to uncover the facts. I mean, there was no question that that was an investigation that was going to do whatever it took to find out what happened.
Congressman Mark Meadows told Chuck Todd earlier tonight that the FBI is engaged in activities it shouldn't have. Take a listen to this song.
If there's nothing wrong that happened, why is everybody so worried about the investigators?
Here's why they're worried about the investigators, and why I believe that we need to investigate the investigators with a special prosecutor. When you have FBI agents, when you have FBI agents sharing with the media internal documents and internal conversations with the media on an ongoing investigation, that is not supposed to happen.
Investigate the investigators, Nick. What do you think of that?
I think it's absolutely absurd. I mean, this is a joke. There's no evidence that anybody shared information with the media. There is no evidence that there were any leaks. And just to step back a minute, we're talking about the FBI. The FBI is the investigative arm of the Department of Justice. They don't decide who gets prosecuted. They don't decide what charges are brought. They don't decide what's brought before a grand jury. This whole thing is a big red herring. I mean, even the evidence that they came up with on this one agent, I think the worst thing he did was to call Trump an idiot. Trump's own Secretary of State called him a moron. Now, I don't know, to me, a moron is probably worse than an idiot. But giving that the benefit of the doubt that an idiot is worse than a moron, I mean, who cares? It doesn't make any difference.
Let me add the caveat that the Secretary of State denied, I think dismissed as nonsense, that report. But
well, he didn't deny it, though.
Yeah, no, he dismissed it, I think, is a more safer thing. All right, Yamiche Alcindor, Ken Vogel, thank you both.